Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. This week, the wedding story from Britain that gets the royal treatment the world over.
The announcement that was heard literally around the world.
The House of Windsor and its hold on the global media. L'affaire Bettencourt, the explosive political story in France that has the Sarkozy government and the country's biggest newspaper at legal loggerheads. India's mainstream news media.
What kind of story do you want?
Red-faced over their cozy relationship with lobbyists and politicians. And from Edinburgh to the Hebrides. A bike tour with a difference in our web video of the week. It is a rare story that gets front-page coverage around the world. Rarer still when that story contains not a trace of bad news. But that's what happened when Buckingham Palace announced the engagement of Prince William and Kate Middleton. We're going to look at some of the reasons that the wedding plans of a young man who is second in line to the British throne are of global interest. Among them, the lingering after effects of the Diana story, the role that the voracious British tabloid press plays in all of this, and the commercial aspect of a family that serves the media well. Our starting point this week is London, an announcement that has captured the attention, if not the hearts, of news editors almost everywhere, and the royal family that is arguably the last vestige of a faded global empire.
Royal officials announcing this morning that Prince William and Kate Middleton are indeed engaged to be married.
The announcement of this news, in global terms, it was just enormous.
On a basic human level, lots of people are a sucker for a story of a young man and a young woman falling in love.
She grew up as an ordinary girl. She happened to fall in love with a prince, and all of a sudden the world's eyes are upon her.
The man who will one day be king proposes to the girl he met at university.
From an editorial point of view, there's the issue that you're talking about the British royal family.
He's a true romantic.
It was just one news story about one young couple from a rain-swept country, a few small islands in the North Atlantic. And yet,
it was astonishing to see every front page of virtually every newspaper in every part of the world and every television station consuming this story.
The announcement that was heard literally around the world.
That shows how strong that brand is.
A ravenous media throng, a ring rich in symbolism.
Well, I think there are many factors. I mean, not least is Britain's history. It used to be an empire, and so obviously countries which were once linked in that way will have still an interest, even if it's just a curiosity.
Just take the Americans.
The happy bride and groom-to-be.
They do know that the British monarchy once ruled over them. That would be true in India, that would be true in Pakistan, that would be true in Canada, Australia.
Prince William, second in line to the throne.
New Zealand, South Africa, large parts of Africa, and beyond.
In Australia, that was really interesting for me, because Australia is a country that we hear is on the verge of becoming a republic, and yet it was a huge story for them.
Everyone's very happy for them, wishing them well for their life together.
Wall-to-wall coverage, documentaries about Prince William and Kate Middleton. They went crazy for this story.
This is a monarchy that did go global, and still the legacy of that lives on.
Britannia no longer rules the waves the way it did in days of empire, but it still punches above its weight on the airwaves. The publicly funded British Broadcasting Corporation, through its size and reach, influences news editors, news agendas, and audiences the world over. And London is a global media center. Every major international news outlet has a presence here. The royals are on their doorstep, inexpensive and easy to cover. Easier still when the British tabloids drive the editorial side of the story by digging up the dirt on a family that pretends to be squeaky clean.
And also then there's the fact of what has happened within the British monarchy in recent years.
So there is an air of mystery about her as she quietly walks.
We had the fairy tale weddings of the 1980s, the divorces of the 1990s.
Diana, Princess of Wales, has died.
And indeed, the very tragic death of Diana, Princess of Wales.
The world has lost Princess Diana at age 36.
And therefore, that soap opera, which gripped people and came to a head in her death in 1997, still has a following, and this feels like the next chapter. In fact, in soap operas, you do always have that. The story moves to the next generation.
Much has been made in the media of the similarities between the two engagement announcements, the most glaring being the late Diana's ring on the new bride-to-be. But time and events have changed things. This is a new generation of royals, with a new generation of media advisors working behind the scenes.
The royal family's press operation pre-Diana was pretty amateurish. There was no real skill sets of people involved in that office who could joust the growth of tabloid media. The royal household has been more professionalised now. There are some incredibly astute people. And of course, with William and Harry, you know, the two princes, they have a keen understanding of what they want as two young men and the way they want the things handled.
I think Prince William is the one who has learned all of the lessons because he had a ringside seat, a very painful ringside seat. He saw what went wrong for his mother, and he's determined that it doesn't happen for his wife to be Kate. Diana's complaint was that after she became engaged, she was just sort of left there with no one guiding her. I think William will constantly guide Kate.
The body language was fascinating in that interview. He was definitely in charge. Kate Middleton looking up at him. He patted her on the leg at one point and said,
"She did really well."
Yeah.
We did very well.
And, you know, he was the one in charge. He's the one familiar. She was learning the ropes, and she kept saying, "I've got a good teacher in him."
I thought his bride looked very nervous, but that people would have found that very charming, that she didn't look too media polished. I think people would have reacted against that, actually. So if I was only a news manager, a spin doctor for the palace, I'd have been thinking she came over unspun, which is the best kind of spin, and there was no news. So a perfect result, perfect score for the palace.
The relationship between the royal couple and the media pack is in its honeymoon phase. After the wedding, William and Kate will live near his Air Force base in a remote corner of Britain. As media strategies go, it's a simple one. Keep them at a distance. It probably won't work. Our Global Village Voices now on Britain's House of Windsor and the news media.
I think the reason why news about the British royal family has global impact is because they provide viewers all around the world with Cinderella-like fairy tales. People want to believe that it is possible to break through for a girl from a regular family to marry a prince and become a princess.
People here in America have been absolutely freaking out, and William and Kate are on the cover of all the magazines. And I think that a big part of this has to do with William being, you know, Diana's son.
The interest in Kate Middleton will be just as intense as it was with Diana, and the media will go to great lengths in order to satisfy that interest for us. Hopefully the royal family has learned lessons from the past.
Our Global Village Voices platform is how our viewers let us know what they think of the global news media and the way that news is covered. We've now surpassed 5,000 fans on Facebook. You can go there or to our Twitter page to see what stories we're working on and how you can add your voice to the mix. You can also reach us through email. We're at listeningpost@aljazeera.net. Time now for Listening Post News Bites. India is one of the world's fastest growing news markets, but the mainstream media's credibility there has taken a hit with the release of a series of recordings of phone calls between Indian journalists and a lobbyist, Neera Radia. The recordings were made by the Indian tax authorities as part of an investigation into government corruption. The transcripts and audio files went viral and have since appeared in some mainstream news outlets. One of the journalists has been identified as Barka Dutt of the news network NDTV, who was recorded apparently acting as a go-between in discussions between political parties.
So I haven't been able to speak to the top guys. Now it's just finished, and now I'm going to make my set of calls.
Another journalist caught on tape was Veer Sanghvi of the Hindustan Times. He's talking with a lobbyist for one of India's richest business families, the Ambanis, about an upcoming article in his newspaper.
What kind of story do you want? Because this will go as counterpoint, so it will be like most read. So it can't seem too slanted, yet it's an ideal opportunity to get all the points across.
The reporters are protesting their innocence, saying the calls were part of their everyday journalistic duties. The curious legal case against Julian Assange, the co-founder of the whistleblowing website WikiLeaks, continues to inch along in a very public way, driven by media reports. News dispatches out of Sweden say the prosecutor's office there wants help from Interpol, the international police organization, to issue Mr. Assange with an arrest warrant so that he can be questioned in Sweden. The WikiLeaks frontman has been under investigation since August this year, when the accusations first came up, before being dropped in the first 24 hours prior to the case being reopened again. It is not as though Julian Assange has been in hiding. He held a very public news conference in London on October 23rd.
That simply is the real politic.
We found Assange easily enough and managed to get an interview, so have other news networks. Assange's UK-based lawyer, Mark Stevens, says his client made himself available while in Sweden, in the UK, and even offered to be questioned via video link, but that those offers have all been declined. Stevens calls this a case of persecution, not a prosecution. Tensions in Lebanon have led to an 11th-hour decision by the British Broadcasting Corporation to shelve, at least for now, a documentary on the 2005 assassination of Prime Minister Rafik Hariri. The speculation in Lebanon was that the film would accuse Hezbollah operatives of the crime. The documentary was set to air amid reports that a UN special tribunal was about to issue indictments that would implicate Hezbollah. That prompted the group's leader Hassan Nasrallah to warn that Hezbollah would, quote, cut off the hand, unquote, of anyone who tried to make arrests. The BBC has released a statement saying that it needed to make absolutely sure that the three-part series called Murder in Beirut complied with editorial guidelines before airing it on BBC World. However, pulling a documentary that close to airtime is highly unusual because typically all compliance issues are dealt with well before that late stage. 9 publications in Myanmar, the country formerly known as Burma, have been suspended after authorities decided that they covered the release of pro-democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi too comprehensively. 8 news weeklies were suspended for their reporting of the dissidents' release, and then a publication called First 11 Sports Journal was targeted by the government. The front page had some innocuous-looking headlines on British football. Sunderland frees Chelsea, United stunned by Villa, and Arsenal advance to grab their hope. But check out the shading of some of the letters, and you'll see that not all cryptic puzzles are on the inside pages. The message reads, Sue free, unite and advance to grab the hope. We're back after the break with a piece on a political story out of France with a major media angle to it. Welcome back. What started off as a row between mother and daughter over family finance, albeit a very rich family, has grown into a scandal that has reached the highest levels of the French government and has pitted that government against the country's newspaper of record. In France, the story is known as L'Affaire Bettencourt. It features clandestine tape recordings that media outlets say implicate President Nicolas Sarkozy and the country's wealthiest woman, Liliane Bettencourt, in illegal campaign financing. The story was broken by an internet upstart, a site called Mediapart. The newspaper Le Monde arrived a little bit late on the scene, but has kept the story alive, and the Sarkozy government isn't taking it lying down. The Listening Post's Jason Mohican now from Paris on lawsuits, accusations of spying, and the media story behind a political story that just won't go away.
The Paris headquarters of Reporters Without Borders, or RSF. Since 1985, this organization has campaigned against the lack of press freedom in countries like North Korea, Iran, and Sudan. Recently, though, it's turned its attention to the home front.
In our worldwide press freedom index, France is in the 44th rank. The idea of this campaign is to focus on the situation of press freedom in France, and we put the President Sarkozy behind the national flag, saying that he should be ashamed about the situation of press freedom in France.
Sarkozy and the media have been going at it for a long time.
The battle between press and power is in full swing here in France.
Yes, exactly. It looks a bit like a media war.
And the Bettencourt affair, a story broken by new media and sustained by the old guard, hasn't improved the situation.
The French President Nicolas Sarkozy is facing a criminal investigation over accusations he accepted illegal donations from the country's richest woman.
Liliane Bettencourt, heiress to the L'Oréal Cosmetics empire. Her conversations with financial advisors were reportedly recorded by her butler, who gave the tapes to her daughter, who handed them over to the police, who then leaked them to reporters.
I think the really interesting thing about the Bettencourt affair, l'affaire Bettencourt, is that it was broken by a website, by Mediapart.
Mediapart is an internet startup, but it was founded by veterans of Le Monde, France's biggest newspaper. They published excerpts from the butler's tapes and an interview with Bettencourt's accountant in which she claimed that Sarkozy's campaign received envelopes of cash from the Bettencourt family. Sarkozy's administration fought back.
Sarkozy's lieutenant's reaction to the publishing of this story have been very undemocratic. They said we were some of them said we were right-wing media, extreme right. Some of them said we were Nazi. Others said we were Trotskyites. I mean, they were all nonsense accusations and not very respectful of the counterpower of the press.
Le Monde followed up the story and brought other parts of the scandal to light. The government's reaction, according to Le Monde, was to spy on the reporters involved.
Le contre-espionnage français.
The intelligence agency carried out an illegal search into one of our journalists' telephone bills, apparently identified the source, who was a top French magistrate, who then had to leave his job immediately.
Qui a dû immédiatement renoncer à ses fonctions.
Le Monde is taking its fight to court and has filed a complaint against the Sarkozy administration.
Le Monde has called it an unbridled attack on press freedoms. President Nicolas Sarkozy's office, though, says the whole story is untrue.
I think it is extraordinary for a newspaper to take legal action. Newspapers usually are fending off writs, they don't issue them.
De dire sa vérité.
When it comes to media, Sarkozy is used to having friends in all the right places. And since he's been in office, he's been putting his supporters in prominent media positions.
Sarkozy's now declared that the head of France's 5 state-controlled channels will be directly appointed by the government.
President Sarkozy is a friend of the main owners of the biggest medias, printed medias, TV channels, radio stations in France.
Earlier this year, Sarkozy focused on Le Monde itself. He tried to prevent a group of investors associated with the opposition Socialist Party from buying a controlling stake in the paper. He failed.
President Sarkozy was so concerned by the takeover, he summoned the paper's publisher to the Élysée and threatened to withhold state subsidies if it went ahead.
Le Monde est un quotidien qui est un contre-pouvoir.
Le Monde is a daily that is a counterpower. We are not yes men. We are not a news outlet that grants absolution to the powerful. We are not about reverence.
Au pouvoir, nous ne sommes pas dans la révérence.
But according to Mediapart, Le Monde had the Bettencourt tapes before their website did, and they sat on them.
They refused to publish the tapes that started the whole Bettencourt affair. They exercised censorship on the content of the tape. So it's really weird. Now they realize that they missed something really big, that they did not react the way journalists should.
This scandal is generating a lot of heat within journalistic and political circles. But does it resonate with consumers, the people ultimately affected by Sarkozy's media meddling?
Personally, it's a subject that doesn't apply to me much, because I'm not interested in politics.
I think that he has, of course, a lot of power, and he controls a lot of things in the media. But with the affair Bettencourt, I'm not sure that he was really involved. I don't think a person like him can be involved in that. Maybe his government.
Je ne pense pas. I don't think that President Sarkozy controls the French press. On the contrary, he is heavily attacked by the media and the way the media expresses itself.
Nous n'avons pas l'intention de mener un combat.
We did not have the intention of carrying out a fight against the president. That's not what we're about. We simply want the law to be enforced. In the Bettencourt-L'Oréal affair, the protection of journalists, which is ensured by law, has been violated by the Élysée. And, for the first time in France, we want the judges to decide.
Mais nous voulons que les juges décident.
Le Monde is suing the government for spying. The government is suing Mediapart for libel. And Reporters Without Borders is trying to get the general public to care about what's at stake. This is a story that could all come down to what the courts decide, and whether media freedom in the age of the internet has become an antiquated notion in France.
More Global Village voices now on the coverage of l'affaire Bettencourt.
Many people have accused French President Nicolas Sarkozy of interfering in the press to advance his personal agenda as well as those of his administration. Indeed, he does have close friends who control a significant portion of the media, from newspapers and magazines to TV and radio. But there remains a healthy presence of left-wing and moderate media players that remain critical of his administration.
The relationship between Sarkozy and the French media is quite ambiguous. On the one hand, the president maintains the confidentiality of sources in the media. On the other hand, the French counterintelligence services spies on government insider informers for the newspaper Le Monde.
The French political system of the Fifth Republic provides the president with so much executive powers that it is fair to say that the president is a kind of absolute monarch with a 5-year mandate. This creates a climate of fear and intimidation which, at the end of the day, affects journalism.
And finally, regular viewers will know that we are not above featuring daredevils in our web videos of the week, be they gymnasts, trampolinists, or acrobatic bikers. The thing about most of those videos, though, is that they're shot on the fly. They can be high on action, but low on technical quality. This one's the exception. It features Danny McCaskill bouncing across Scotland on his bike. It's beautifully shot and set to some evocative music. Our only regret is that we do not have time to show you all of what is a lovely little film, but we've linked to it on our Facebook page if you'd like to see more. We'll see you next time at The Listening Post.